Hey, I'm Jake, and welcome back to my lounge. Today's musician spotlight is going to be Tom Waits. My first one was with Willie Nelson, which, by the way, my family picked this little trinket up for me just the other day, so I got him sitting right there. It's kind of fun. Tom Waits is an artist I've known for a really long time. I'm going to go into a little bit of story about that, but he's one of my favorite artists. And he's not necessarily the most digestible, I guess. And I'll talk a little bit about that and how my family feels about Tom. So, my first experience with Tom Waits was when I bought the soundtrack for Dead Men Walking, which is a movie from 1995. I think it won a lot of awards. I actually never saw the movie, but Bruce Springsteen had a track on there, and which was actually nominated for an Academy Award, I believe. And then also Eddie Vedder had a couple of tracks on there, and that's really why I bought it. That soundtrack, actually those songs weren't in the movie. They were just songs that I guess help support the theme and story of the movie. But so the first song I heard of Tom Waits was The Fall of Troy. I was a senior in high school, and I had never heard anyone like him. It just completely changed what I thought could be possible for a singer-songwriter. And really it was that gravelly voice that he's so known for. Also, like the musical style of it was just completely blew my mind. And they had another track on there, Walk Away, which wasn't as notable, I guess, didn't quite catch my attention quite like The Fall of Troy. But I never forgot about that song, but it didn't lead me to really dive into his catalog for about 20 more years. And I'm really sorry that I took so much time off, but I didn't really encounter anyone else that was a fan of his, and there was really no additional exposure to his music. So I don't have all of his albums. In fact, I didn't even count them. There's only a few of them that I have. So there's about 17 studio albums, and I'm going to go through the albums that I have and some of the things that I like about those. I do plan on acquiring his full catalog of albums. But I put these pretty much in chronological order. So, Closing Time was his first studio album. So Tom is from California, and he was playing at the Troubadour. If you're a fan of music, you're aware of the Troubadour in L.A. In the early 70s, he was playing I believe every Monday he was playing. And through that, David Geffen discovered him in 1972 and signed him. And this was the debut album. This is the softer version of his voice that hadn't quite matured into that gravelly signature that he has now. Old 55, which is actually a song also that the Eagles eventually covered. I think it's been covered by a few other people. Many of Tom's songs have been covered. I Hope I Don't Fall in Love with You is very recognizable. I think a lot of people have heard that. I really enjoy Midnight Lullaby, but the song that got him picked up was Grapefruit Moon, and that's what David Geffen had heard. And then you've got the title track, Closing Time, which is an instrumental. None of these albums that I have, I think, are originals or there's anything that valuable about them. They're all represses, fairly modern. The cover art I really enjoy. It kind of supports what you would think of when you hear Tom and the mood that his music brings. You've got what looks like a very tired musician who's been working hard to make a living as a musician. It looks like a couple packs of cigarettes have been extinguished, and on this ratty old piano. He's alone in the dark and got a half-drink bottle of booze there in front of him. So that's his first album. Great album. So the next one I have, The Heart of Saturday Night. So this was the first vinyl that I've got of Tom Waits when I had gotten back into the hobby. This might have been a couple years ago, a year or two ago that I got this. This whole album is fantastic, and again, for me, it's so much about the mood that he takes you on this ride with. So there's really no favorite for me on this album. This album, Jack Kerouac comes up all the time as a major influence. He's an author that Tom Waits really appreciates. As I come to prepare, or as I'm preparing what I'm going to say about these albums, it just leads to more questions. Then I end up doing a lot more research. So there's several hours of research to kind of answer these questions that I come up with and come around across these interesting tidbits. They were talking about the cover art to this album, and it was kind of an homage to Frank Sinatra's Wee Small Hours, which I happen to have that one as well. So I grabbed that. You can see the similarities there. I really enjoy that album. So then we go on to Blue Valentine, Tom Waits. This is a gatefold. There's just one album in there. By and large, I think on every one of these albums, you do get a full set of lyrics, which is fun. You don't necessarily understand everything that he's saying with some of the compositions, so it's good to go back and read some of those phrases. It's very, very poetic with whatever Tom has written. Pretty much everything on here was his. He did cover Somewhere from West Side Story. This is the album where you really start to see that noted voice, that gravelly voice. My favorite song on here is Christmas Card from a Hooker. It's quite an interesting story. You'll want to look that up and probably see what I'm talking about, where he gets a Christmas card from a hooker. This, on the back, they highlight this Thunderbird, which was a 66 Thunderbird. He actually, at the time, and his girlfriend, who's on the back, I've got a couple notes for myself. That's his girlfriend at the time, who was Ricky Lee Jones, who's apparently just barely releasing a memoir where she talks about her time with Tom Waits back in the late 70s. But this is a 66 Thunderbird. And they've got that pictured in a couple of, the artwork here. So that's really kind of, you really start to pick up on that change in his voice. This one came out in '78, so about 5 years. This was his 6th studio album. Okay. This was Heart Attack and Vine. I didn't know anything about this. My record store, Lavender Vinyl on 25th Street in Ogden, just posted, among many other albums, this particular one. I said, I'll go ahead and take it. Didn't know anything about it, but it said Tom Waits, and I said I wanted it. I absolutely love this one. This might be my favorite one so far. It's definitely a more rocky and bluesy. The song Jersey Girl, which was also covered by Bruce Springsteen, is great. This was, if I were to try and get somebody to become a fan of Tom Waits, this would probably be where I would start them off with. As I was reading researching on this, a critic from Rolling Stone said, Tom Waits can find more beauty in the gutter than most people would find in the Garden of Eden. And then he goes on to say that he finds him as unique and lovable minor talent, which I'd have to completely disagree with, but he was only had a few years under his belt as a commercial artist at that time. This is just a really good kind of rockin' album, and I think would be the easiest way to really kind of set the hooks into someone. My family knows that I'm a big fan of Tom Waits, and they love to give me grief over it, but it kind of works to my advantage. If I wanted to come down into the lounge and just be alone, and no one in my family is going to come down and spend time with me while I'm listening to Tom Waits, so it's kind of a family repellent if I need it. Works out pretty well for me. Okay, so now we're going to skip about 20 years to the next album that I have, which is Mule Variations. So this came out in 1999. This is a double album, so there's 16 songs. If you're looking at Tom Waits on YouTube and you see a lot of his music videos, there's some really interesting imagery that is put together. You see you standing under an umbrella with a snake kind of draped off of that. The color is really good. You see just very dark gray tones, which is part of the mood that he's going for. The opening is kind of, so the first track, Big in Japan, and I didn't know this, but it made a lot of sense, but Les Claypool, basically about 3 members from Primus are his band in Big in Japan, and it makes sense. It kind of clicks. Well, okay, that's why it sounds like that. Not something that these previous albums would lead you to believe would be his direction, but it works great. One thing I love about Tom Waits are the different instruments that he'll use, things that I'd never even heard of. So on the second track, Low Side of the Road, one of the musicians is playing a chumbus and dusagoni. I couldn't figure out what a dusagoni is, but a chumbus is almost like a banjo type of an instrument, a stringed instrument. And where else? He's got some other bassoons and bass clarinets show up. Where was another one on here? Harps. There's just some really interesting. He's open to experiment with the instrumentation. Really dark imagery. If you go to the house where nobody lives, it just talks about a home that's on a street and people packed up and left, and where he wonders about the types of memories that would have been abandoned in that house. Georgia Lee, a very sad song, song about what sounds like a little girl that is found dead. So a lot of those themes are really carried through the album. And then we've got probably the most well-known song on this album is Come On Up to the House. So I kind of talked about this on my Willie Nelson one, is on the Heroes, which I actually have up here, album, Willie and Sheryl Crow and Lucas Nelson all cover Come On Up to the House. But that's a song that's been covered by many, many people. I didn't bother to look to see how many, but quite a few people. It's a beautiful song. Okay, so about the final set that I have is the Orphans Trilogy, which consists of Brawlers, Ballers, and Bastards. So this was released back in 2006. You can get each one individually. You don't have to buy them in a box set, and that's how I did it. This is a collection of 26, they're referred to as rare, and 30 brand new songs. I don't know exactly. I didn't research which ones are which. So the first one is more rough cut rocks and rock and blues type. That's kind of how they were categorized. The second one is more melancholy tunes and ballads. I'm just using the description that I came across. And then the third disc is more experimental and spoken word pieces. There's some story time reading on here, like Children's Story and Nirvana. This is definitely for the more advanced Tom Waits enthusiasts. This would not be what I would introduce people to for Tom Waits if I wanted them to become fans. Again, I mean, I'm going to like pretty much everything that he does. So this is fantastic. It's the same cover art on everything. They're all gatefolds, 2 LPs in each one. The inside, they'll have different artwork. My favorite song on this is actually the last one, Rains on Me. It's my favorite there. Of the 3, no doubt, Ballers. This was the first one that I got of the 3, and this is my favorite. So you've got Bend Down the Branches, Long Way Home, Never Let Go, Goodnight Irene, which is a classic that's been sung by many people, and then of course Fall of Troy is on here. I didn't bother to get, and I don't even know if you can get Dead Man Walking on vinyl, but I really will listen to everything, all sides of both discs in there. And then yeah, I got this and I went through it a couple of times, and it's a fun ride, but it is really pretty interesting. So that's all I've got from his discography, except this one little surprise. I spend a lot of time on YouTube and different series that I follow and things. And then this gem popped up. So I just saw in the queue of other video choices that were being recommended, One from the Heart, a music soundtrack of a movie I'd never heard of Tom Waits singing duets with Crystal Gale, of all people. And the final song on the album, Take Me Home, was the one that I came across. And I just was blown away. I was like, I have to have this. I got to track this down. So I think I went on to Discogs, and they sent it out to me. I do believe this is an original pressing. It's in mint condition. And I grew up with Crystal Gale. I knew who she was. I don't have any other albums, but she was a big deal when I was a kid. And actually, I really, really enjoy this. So this is important. This came out in 1981. This is where he met his wife, Kathleen Brennan, who has been co-producer and a really important part of his career. She worked for the movie studio. This soundtrack was nominated for an Academy Award, so it was very well received. And actually, I really like the trumpet that's appearing in the soundtrack over and over. I haven't seen this movie. Again, I'd never even heard of it. It's a Francis Coppola movie, which is interesting. And there, on the back, you've got this wild image of some girl in a martini glass floating over a street scene from Las Vegas. I'm going to have to check that out and maybe give a review on that. But just a big surprise. I had never even heard anything of it. And YouTube, thank you for bringing that up. You know, Tom Waits is pretty well known for well-placed quotes. And here are just a couple that I wanted to share. And anyway, I'll just go ahead and read them. I don't know what the context was, but Tom said, "The earth is not my home. I'm just passing by." And you really kind of get, he's such an interesting personality that's not the normal type of personality you would ever come across, not even for a musician. And it kind of feels like almost this alien force, this that's got this depth to him, and he's just shooting on through. and leaving this trail of beautiful music and poetry. And then and he's got such a sensitive side as well. Another quote is, "All that you've loved is all you own," which is really true. The sum of all of our possessions don't exceed what we've just loved. It's that the highest of the human emotion. So all these little tidbits that can kind of make you stop and think, and he just has that perception. And he's able to voice that, has that gift to put it in song, put it in writing. And I'll just, to wrap this up, Tom was very good friends with Dave Letterman. And so when David Letterman was wrapping up his show back in like 2015, Tom Waits came on. And I'll share a link in here, but he wrote a song, I believe he wrote a song for that farewell called "Take One Last Look." And I'll leave the link in here. So I'd love to hear from you what your favorite Tom Waits albums or songs are, and kind of your experience with such a unique singer-songwriter.